So today begins the introduction of ground driving for Moon. So that I go through, it's going to be a long video, but you can certainly fast forward through parts, but go through some of the steps I do for the first day of ground driving. I've already shown the video of how I kind of work on getting attention in the halter changes of directions. We now have a longer lunge line today, and we're connected to the bridle. One thing that I think is really a good investment for when you're starting this is there are more proper ways to attach the lunge line and to use clips. They make it very one-sided, and when I'm starting a horse like this and I don't know if they're going to turn, I want to make sure I have a double-sided. So this is just a simple Y clip that clips onto both sides of the bridle, and it actually has a swivel clip below it that I can clip my lunge line into. That way if she switches directions on me or I want her to switch directions, I'm not as worried about having the lunge line running through the wrong side of the head. That's one thing I always make sure I have. Again, you'll also see she has a surcingle on, just a simple basic fabric surcingle with a cloth, lining here to kind of help support her a little bit. She's in boots. My reins are tucked up through the throat latch, and we're going to just start first. I always have my dressage whip as well. Important for that because she was a little pushy at first in this, and I don't want to go straight to the bit. I want to go back to my basics. Go girl. Go back to my basics of using the whip if I need to remind her to go back rather than yanking and hauling on her mouth. Same thing with forward. I should be able to do forward. Go girl. And we have that. So I want all that to be light and easy before I even worry about trying to yank and go on with the bridle. Other key thing is gloves. Always have gloves. Otherwise your hands will get torn to shreds if your horse decides to take off. You'll also notice I use my lunge line in a slightly different way than what's approved by like Pony Club and the Dressage Federation, etc. I don't loop it around in a loop. I tend to fold it back on itself so that I have it like this. It allows me, just from my own personal perspective, to be able to lengthen and shorten the line a lot more easily without getting it potentially wrapped around my hand. So it's just a personal preference. It's not the approved way to do it, but it's how I do it. It helps keep me organized. I think whatever's more important is rather than worry about being proper sometimes, is worry about being what's safe and doing what makes you most comfortable so that you don't feel disorganized with all of your equipment. Because if you get tangled, that's the last thing you want. So do it in a way that makes it comfortable for you without wrapping it around anything. So the first thing we're going to do is literally just what I did with the halter and lead rope, is we're going to do changes of directions in the bridle on a lunge line, and then we're going to go to actually starting the lunge. I have never lunged her yet, so today will be the first day I lunge her. And this is kind of my first step into getting her ready for ground driving. I'm going to show you how I actually, on the lunge line, kind of see how she's going to respond to me being behind her by letting her lengthen on the lunge line, but we'll start there. So, beginning, I'm going to actually take the whip away because we've already done some forward, backward, so I'm not going to have the dressage whip. We're just going to do changes of direction with the bit. Good girl. I'm going to get her going around me, just like we have been. So she should know this by now, right? We've done this on the halter, and we're already kind of turning in. Go ahead, go out. And I haven't lunged her, but it doesn't mean she hasn't been lunged. I'm sure they lunged her at new vocations. But again, when I do the same concept, when I switch direction, I pull, swing, change hands. This comes out here, the hand comes around, go girl. Now I want to be light, I have a bit in her mouth now. I don't want to be yanking and hauling on her mouth. So I'm going to be as light as possible. But also I want her to learn that the contact is okay, that it's not the end of the world. So I'm going to change directions, which means I have to switch hands, gathering up the bunch, turning the head in, hand comes out, turning her head, good girl. And we trot it off a little bit through the circle, but I'm not correcting her much for that right now because it is the first time we've done this in a bridle. So I'm going to change direction again, I'm going to change hands, I'm going to pull the head in, hand goes out, she's got to turn around me, hand goes out, go girl, go girl. I'm doing this really light and easy right now because like I said, I haven't done this yet with her. So this is the first time I have her on a lunge line, and the first time I actually also have her in a bridle. So kind of doing a few firsts today, but we're going to try it all out. She's smart, she's willing, just get distracted. We're going to do it again, hand out, head, good girl. And we came a little close in the circle there. One thing you want to make sure you're not being run over, good girl. Now we'll kind of go to a trot here, let her on a bigger line. And when I ask her to walk, rather than pulling and yanking on her head, I'm going to start to slowly make the circle smaller. All I'm doing is taking one hand, reaching forward, sliding it back together, one hand reaching forward, sliding it back together until I get a walk, and I'm giving her a release so she can go back to the circle again. So we're doing lots of spiral in and out. We're going to trot. I'm going to bring my hand out. Good girl. Trot. Good girl. I'm going to give her more line so that she doesn't feel like she's off balance. That's a lot of the challenges with these off-track horses and any horse that you're starting for at the beginning. Is they get off balance easily. Now we're getting a little quick, so I'm going to reach out with my right hand, slide in, hold it on itself so I'm not tangled, hold it in until she starts to slow down, trying to help her balance herself until she naturally balances herself. I want her to do this on her own. Good girl, walk on. Nope, nope, not turning. Go ahead and get behind her a little bit. Good girl. Walk on. Good girl. And we'll change the direction now. Now, I'm going to do this. Hand out. Other hand comes through. She knows it. Put your head around. Good girl, good girl. Thank you. Now we'll try and lunge this direction for a little bit. Now we may actually put the long lines on her and start with that a little bit today. I am a mess of tangle today for some reason. It's always when I'm videoing, I get everything out of control. Okay, there we go. Back to a little more organization. Let's go. Go ahead. Trot. Trot. Good girl. And this is why I don't take an off-track horse and start them on lunging right away. I start with changes of direction in a short proximity with a halter and a lead rope. Lots of them do not lunge at the track. They ground drive, or they might have the same kind of concept on a hot walker, but they're not used to lunging. It's not something that most track people are doing on a regular basis. If putting them on a lunge line, they might gallop around and run around and you get engaged in the bit. So that's why I start with getting attention in small spaces first. Good girl. And we're not going to do any cantering or anything on the first times on the lunge line. We're just going to walk and trot, and we're going to change direction. And then I'm going to show you what I mean about seeing how she'll behave. I'm going to try and, okay, get over. Good girl, good girl. So now what I'm going to do is she seemed to be better going to the right, actually. So I'm going to let her lengthen a little bit to the right. What we're going to do, we're going to trot, good girl. And I've also done some trot work in hand with her, so she should know some of her verbal cues a little bit. It's not that she often knows from other places. But when I say we're going to lengthen, I'm going to get a little bit behind her and drive her down the long wall. Good girl. And I'm going to pull her back and start to get quick. So we're basically spiraling. I'm going to let her relax a little, slow her down, before we lengthen again. And this gives me an idea of how forward she'll be naturally when I get behind her. So I'm slowly getting behind her. Good girl. I get an idea of this is more of a position I would be in when I'm long lining her. So I'm going to get an idea of how will she be when I'm not right at her shoulder, behind her. Got a little bit of an idea here. That it's not the end of the world. I'll try that on the other side too. Come back and relax. I'm going to slowly pull the head in. Shorten the circle, make it smaller. Good girl, so she walks. Keep her walking. Now we're going to ask her to halt. Halt. She's going to turn right in. She's a little too interested and curious in me, which is good and bad at the same time. Bump around. Good girl. But she's really smart. She's really willing. She's just easily distracted. I think if I ask her, this is the side I always get myself all disorganized. We're going to reorganize. There we go. We're going to trot. Come on. Trot. And just swing it around, circle the end of the lunge line. That can act as a whip for you without hitting her. Now when I come down this way, you'll see I'm going to let her go forward. So this is no different than free lunging. When I had her in the arena, I'd be driving behind, free lunging. She'd be free. Good girl. And we're going to relax. Relax. Good girl. Relax. Good girl. Easy trot. Good girl. Trot. Good girl. We're going to lengthen a little. We're going to follow behind. Follow behind. Oh, good girl. We're going to follow behind. So I'm much more in a position now where you'll see I'm actually almost driving her lightly. This is what I also like about having the bit, the bit connector, the Y connector, because it allows me to get a little different position without, and I'm still putting pressure on the outside of the bit. I'm not sliding the bit through her mouth. It does mimic the reins a little bit better, and I don't have to switch directions if I need to. Good girl. Now we're going to go ahead and halt. So I'm going to change my position, pull the head in. She's right on it. Good girl. Good job. Okay. So from there, we're going to connect the long lines because she seems to be telling me she's good for it and ready for it. So we're going to start that right away today. Now, the steps for doing that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the reins just so I have something to hold on to while I'm putting all this together without having a long lunge line hanging off. I don't want, that'll get a little bit precarious. So I don't want that hanging on the ground while I'm trying to get things connected through a source angle. So I am going to unclip. I'll show you this Y connector too. I know. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Come here, big girl. We're going to get that off of there. And I'm going to take the reins over her head for now, just so I have them like they're a lead rope. And I'll show you, throw this off to the side, this Y connector here. You can see it's just connected onto the lunge line, and it has a clip for each side of the bridle. I picked that up at a tack shop for like $7 or $8, if that. They're pretty affordable and pretty easy to find. Now, other things I'm going to need for long lining are, I'm going to need a driving whip. It's like a lunge whip, but just has a shorter tail. And I'm going to have this just in case she starts to suck back because the contact on the bit. I want this to help drive forward so I don't get plowed into backward. So that's me one thing. The other is obviously a set of long lines. I use nylon, you can use leather, there's so many different versions of it. I like mine because they split, most of them do split, but they have a buckle that splits so I can use it as two separate independent lines. Actually I can use it as a lunge line if I need to. Now I'm going to do this just like I would be if I was getting her ready with a saddle and everything, or redoing my girth or something like that. I have the lines usually be over her head. I'm not going to do that for now because I'm going to need, actually I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to put this over her head so I don't get tangled up in them. I'm keeping them loose so they're not all tied up, so I still have a rein to grab hold to if I need to. And we're going to start by, on the near side here, I'm going to take one of my clips, my clip ends. Let's see if I can turn her sideways. Good girl. Good girl. Back. Good girl. I'm going to start her on the low holes here. I'm going to come from the back of the horse, you'll see. Starting from the back. And it's going through the front and clipping onto the bit. Now, difference here, this is something hard to do while I'm talking for some reason. I'm clipping in front of the reins. I'm doing that so that the reins aren't flopping forward in front of her mouth. Now that I've connected on one side, this is going to need to go on the other side of her. So I'm going to lay this, knowing that I trust her, I'm going to lay it on her back here until I get around there so we don't have stuff hanging on the ground. The last thing I want is for her to step on this and yank her mouth, which is why I still have the reins connected. I'm going to come to the far side. I'm doing the same thing. Finding my clip right here, bringing it through, running it through the same loop, the bottom ring, the bottom O-ring, and I'm going to clip that onto the other side. Come here, good girl, in front of the reins. Now she's clipped in. These are still laying up on top of her back. I'm going to be picking them up in a second. But I'm going to now loop her reins together because now I have basically a new set of reins on her. I'm going to loop these around by just twisting 3 times. Looping up through the throat latch. And they'll get clipped. So they're up out of the way. So her riding reins are out of the way. And you could also do this with a bridle that doesn't have reins on. You can take the reins off. That's fine too. But I like to do it with this on. And then when I start her out, we're going to stay really close. So again, organization.